Thanks very much, Elizabeth, for that introduction. It's really great to be back on this campus. And we had our first workshop today, and amazingly talented poets, and most of them are here, so I'm saying the right thing for them. But they're wonderful, wonderful poets. I'm glad to be working. I'm looking forward to the rest of the week to work with them further. I'm fortunate that I live in New York, as I said, but my poems are based in my surroundings, the landscape. So basically, without the landscape, these poems wouldn't exist. There's an expression by the ancient Irish poets that said, try to plug into the place wisdom of your surroundings. They call it Dinshentis, which is a bit of translation of Celtic. So that's what I try to do in all these poems, is plug into that place wisdom of New York City. And I'm fortunate because you can walk down any block in the city and you can probably write a novel. The tough part is to edit what we see. But this particular poem was written about my block. I live on 93rd Street, East 93rd. And down the street from where we live, or towards Lexington Avenue, there's the Marx Brothers, where they lived, where they lived as kids. And so their tenement was still there. So I always wanted to get the Marx Brothers in a poem, and I tried to do that in this poem. Also, there's a reference of Johnny Hartman, a jazz standard singer who has a great baritone voice. If you don't know him, he should be more popular, he's not. So this is called The Seagull That Melted. I know every inch of this city like it's my right hand. I found early on the quickest way to my wrist is the cross-down bus from the Upper East Side of my thumb. My great sense of direction didn't help when I got lost in a novel and couldn't find my way out until the very last page. The plot moved over 10 years, and it was the first time I held on to a little over a decade in my hands and didn't get tired. The final chapters tried to convince me there was an afterlife. I didn't get it, and I still don't. The concept I never did understand. Of course, how could it when I never understood how Johnny Hartman wasn't more famous, when every song he sings sounds like a warm sweater, or even why proof is often found in pudding. I noticed there was a seagull sitting on the window ledge like whipped cream on a slice of apple pie. It's a reminder this city is an island, and the gull confused the heat wave with a wave on the East River, then melted, dripping onto the sidewalk before it could fly away. I guess I noticed more now ever since I decided to look rather than just see. Things move so fast, my younger brother is older than I am now. Before I get too down and stare like an empty storefront COVID left on its way to another surge, I'll go for a walk when the day cools and make sure to go out of my way and head towards the old tenement where the Marx Brothers lived as kids and stroll by to remind myself the best jokes are always old, fast, and in black and white. I'm going to read this. This is the only old one I'm going to read. My niece, when she was around 4 years old, like all kids, the world is new and the language is even newer. And she would take language and expression and put these wonderful, wonderful spins on them. One time she saw me smoking a cigar and she stamped her foot and said, "Kevin, don't you know that if you smoke, you're going to go to Kansas?" And that scared the hell out of me. So this is for my niece, Caitlin, age 4. And actually what I did was, we actually wrote it together. It's the only time I work with another writer on something, and it's called Apple Spider. My niece at age 4 is already tired of the language as we know it. Instead of orange juice, she asked for a glass of apple cider. And at lunch at a diner in town, she wanted me to put a quarter in the little juice box next to the table and play a song. When we got home, I walked up into her bedroom in search of some sort of proof that she is what I always suspected, a genius. Perhaps there would be books on linguistics, philosophy, Shakespeare or essays by Pound, who might have ignited her passion to make it new. But there was nothing by Plato under her purple hippo, no critical works amongst her coloring books, or Socrates hidden behind her dolls. Later, when her mother claimed her daughter can't even read the classics for a 4-year-old or Barney and Lamb Chop, I still wasn't convinced. So my niece told me she heard I like poetries, then asked where they grow. We both picked up our cold glasses of root beer, held onto each other's hand, and headed out the door to see if any were growing in the backyard. So the reason I read that, it's an old poem, is because she called me last month and said she's pregnant. She's no longer 4. She's having her first baby. So you can't believe she was 4, now she's having a child. Her husband's okay. Another new poem from the manuscript is called Real Change. And a lot of these poems I've never read before, so I'm trying not to stumble on them. Real Change. My cousin told me he found Jesus. My cousin told me he found Jesus, which was the easy part, since he couldn't find his way out of Brooklyn. Then this morning, it was so quiet you could hear a cat walking. By noon, the wind kicking in made the trees swing like Count Basie, and the traffic sounded like his horn section. There's a mystery in all of this I could never understand, even if I took it all apart, examined it, and put it back together, replacing Brooklyn with Queens, put tap shoes on Cat's paws, and took Basie's horns away and replaced them with strings. Sometimes it's best just to let things burn, like my friend's cigarettes. He kept smoking as he sat in his dark kitchen, working, losing another job and not working for the last 2 months. When he inhaled, the tip on his Marlboro turned orange, like the moon in the window behind him. The next month, the surgeon removed most of the midnight from his lung. The next year will mean a lot more than the last 45 ever did. I wish you had read the article I did. It said real change starts as soon as you find yourself. I wasted no time. That same night, I took a red eye, then an Amtrak to find where I am now. It took a while, but it was worth the trip. I have a colleague at Sarah Lawrence who was talking about converting from Catholicism to another sect. And we finally did. And it sounded like he went from bad to worse, actually. But I'm a recovering Catholic, so I can say that. But this is a poem called Converting. It's based on a tree outside my window on 93rd Street. Having coffee one day and seeing that the top of the tree was shaped like a crucifix. Converting. On top of the tree across the street, branches are shaped like a crucifix. I walked by so many times on my way to the subway, I finally converted every spiritual belief I had into leaves. In no time, my faith became bark, my soul wood. Soon, I substituted angels for birds. To be clear, rush hour is still hell. At best, horns and sirens are broken hosannas. Although it's winter, I promise you this. In May, the leaves will come again. Jesus said he would come again too, although he hasn't yet, has he? Second chances. I actually came across something that Simonides, the ancient Greek poet, said, which was, paintings are silent poems, and poems are paintings with the gift of speech. Right? So I decided it's about time that I wrote a nephrastic poem, which is, you basically reference a painting in your poem. So this is my first attempt at it. And it's based on Constable Salisbury Cathedral. Have you ever seen it? It's a big, beautiful cathedral. In July, in the summer, there's a bishop walking on a path, and he's pointing his stick up to the cathedral. Probably his wife or girlfriend or whatever is with him. Second chances. I came across a novel in a used bookstore downtown. I took it over to a seat shaped like a baseball glove, sat and began to read. By the end of the first chapter, it was getting more abstract and deep as a lake. I gave up when the pages started getting wet, put it back on the shelf. On the wall near the essays was a print of Constable's Salisbury Cathedral. I took a closer look at the cows a child could hold in its hands, drinking from a pond. A bishop standing on the garden path points his walking stick towards the steeples or sky with clouds as white as his sermons. His wife stands next to him. I can't see her face behind the bonnet she wears, but know she is happy to be standing there forever, since her shawl, curving like full red lips, smiles gently across her shoulders. The cathedral roof is painted the color of July. Trees bend and twist like faith if you don't lose it and let it age. Their leaves green and gold wherever the sunlight melts. After a few minutes, I wanted to tap on the shoulder of the pastor's wife, if she even is his wife, and tell her, "You have been stuck here long enough. You can only hold his cane and never touch you, but I can. Let's leave here, right now. Walk out of this old shop where the snow has begun to fall like the dust on these old bookshelves. So let's go. And you can feel what it's like leaving all that pain behind." I think most families have a relative or a sibling that is sort of disappear from your lives. And you feel guilty about it and you want to try to make it work. And sometimes you just got to do, just let it be, let it go. So I think that's where this poem came from. It's called Further Than You Think. When I was around 8 or 10, my older brother carried his cigarette pack rolled up in his t-shirt sleeve. When he lit a lucky strike, I watched his muscles go up in smoke. By the time I hit my teens, I stopped going to church when I saw the grace I heard in sermons in a movie with Fred Astaire waltzing across a dance floor. And heaven was Ginger Rogers in any gown she wore, gliding with him in his arms. My brother now lives 20 minutes away in the next town. I thought about visiting him, finally, but I would have had to have hopped a plane from LaGuardia to cover the thousands of miles between us. I almost did 10 years ago, then decided not to, so I couldn't book a seat near the window. Is that Beatles song, Let It Be? Favorite jeans. You all know who Keith Richards is, right? Rolling Stone fans? Okay. It's called Faded Jeans. When some memories begin to fade, I wait for them to almost rip and wear them like jeans with a blue jacket so they stay with me a little longer. After my uncle had a stroke, he wasn't able to speak. I had to make sure to memorize everything he couldn't say. A few years later, I was with the first woman I thought I loved until I realized I didn't. Back then, my English was pretty good. Even so, I didn't know how to say, "It's over." She simply did it for me. Lately, I made a decision to get out of the house more. How could I not when today the weather is going to be like Keith Richards, 80 and cool? It's called No Strings. The new year is getting older. Leaves are falling from trees, hair from heads. Speeding cars fly by like weekends, and maybe the real reason tomorrow was yesterday. I can't deny I try on occasion to look good. That new suit hanging in my closet looks so sharp it can cut steak. My brother used to say, family always comes first. We haven't spoken to each other in years. I guess it means there are no strings attached to what's important. Guitars mean nothing. I did realize the real meaning in most of this is found in all the sounds in a single word. And since I'll never be this age again, I can pick up what's left of the world, hold it next to my ear, and listen to it spin. Fingertips. The stars here twinkle like the change in my pocket, meaning even when I'm confused, I can keep a piece of sky over my head for 75 cents. The guy who played his guitar on the corner hasn't been back in over a year. The oak tree shaped like a sax on the next block took over playing for tips every time small birds fluttered up and down his bark like Coltrane's fingers. To help the accidents on 4th Street, it was really paved. It was recently paved, looking like miles of black coffee to help keep drivers awake and alert. It leads all the way downtown where it merges into a circle shaped like a donut. It leads all the way downtown where it merges into a circle shaped like a donut you can't bite into without getting a Vespa or a cab stuck between your teeth. Before going to work, I stopped in the diner near the subway that is older than Elvis, and where the waitress never forgets my name is Honey. Every morning, the special is any day I want, scrambled or fried. Global warming. You know, I was saying, we left New York City a couple of days ago, and it was incredibly hot and humid. You know, the smell was turned up in the heat. And so people have been complaining about the weather. I think it's heaven. It's nice and cool. This is called global warming. The city had never been so hot. July and August broke records. Even vinyl records weren't safe. Short blocks became miles long and soaked in sweat. Humidity was high enough to reach planes and turn them into insects. The air conditioning in my building wasn't strong, so to help cool it off, I ate cereal in the morning that sounded like leaves rustling in October when I added milk. The novel I stopped reading halfway through because it left me cold, I started to read again. Probably the conclusion would leave me even colder. I ordered a new air conditioner. It finally came down from Canada, the way cold fronts came down before global warming. After I installed it and turned on the highest setting to my apartment, it felt like Quebec. When I called my brother to tell him about it, he didn't understand a word I said, said I'd never spoken French before. I'll read one more poem. This is a touch older. During the pandemic, you know, of course the country was hit hard, the world was hit hard. It was devastating. But New York, we really got hit. I think after a couple of months, 40,000 people had died. I think over the first month or two, we didn't come out of our apartment. It was so bad. And so there's a saying by the ancient monks. It goes, "Ora et labora," to work is to pray. So I decided in the beginning of the pandemic I'd have to write. And I realized while I was working on this poem, I was also, in a sense, praying. A secular prayer, but it was a prayer. It's called Not Asking for Much. You'll find anxiety and anger and fear. It also ends on a bit of hope. It's always good to end on something positive so you can go on and write another poem. Not asking for much. I wanted, growling like a wolf as it runs towards me. Before it lunges, Godzilla stomping, each footfall an earthquake as it moves up First Avenue. Or a spaceship shaped like a large plate in the middle of a dinner table with enough food in it to feed a family of 5, spinning a strange sound before it lands in Central Park. I need noise that will give me enough time to run and get away. Instead, this virus is the invisible man, Claude Rains, walking silently. I have no idea when it attacks. There's no special ray gun or sword that lights up when lifted in both hands. Instead, the weapon isn't designed by Spielberg. It turns out to be a bar of soap. That's right, the bar of soap that rests in the dish near my toothbrush. We can't kill the virus except for the germs growing in it. We all have to stay at least 6 feet away from strangers to help stop the spread. I like to stay as far away as my last girlfriend. A hotspot used to mean a large, trendy restaurant downtown where I could never get a table. Now the entire city is a hotspot, where there are no empty beds in any hospital that is filled with the sick and dying. Come on, New York, this has got to stop. I want you back the way you were. I want subways to rattle and shake the fear out of me. Trains to leave Grand Central come back the exact same way. Empty streets crowded again with people whose faces are countries I've never been to, and all laughing and talking, blending together, sounding like the globe. It's not asking too much. I don't want to wear a mask anymore, as if I'm riding with a James gang on our way to rob a Chase bank. I want to be able to sneeze and not be afraid I killed anybody. At least I still believe in the leaves on the trees outside my apartment building. They will soon look like they were dipped in cream for 2 weeks before blowing away. They are the first sign of spring every year. Come on, New York, I'm not asking for much. I would give anything, really, just about anything. I could simply walk up to you and shake your hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you all for being here. I'm thrilled to be back. One of the things that I really love to write is heavily research-based political fiction in the guise of popular genre novels like thrillers. Critics call them beach reads for smart people, which I really love, and Beth kindly ordered 2 of those, and those are here tonight. Flight Risk, which is a contemporary, it has a contemporary setting in rural Appalachia and Chicago. It's about a found object sculptor and mountaintop removal mining, as well as maternal filicide, that very taboo crime. So if you're interested in it, it's sort of a domestic suspense, marital thriller kind of thing is what they're calling it. So that's what that is. And then One Brilliant Flame is connected to what I'll read for you tonight. And I think I read some of that last year. It's set in the 19th century in Key West. It's a historical thriller, and it's about the anti-colonial, anti-racist, pro-labor, leftist, Cuban-American enclave on the island of Key West that functioned as an offshore rebel base for Cuba's anti-colonial struggle against Spain. And most people don't know about that history that went on for decades in Key West. And I got really interested in it and wanted to bring it to a larger audience, so I wrote that thriller, kind of made it exciting and sexy and so on. But another project also grew out of that research. I didn't know anything about that history until I was over 50 years old, even though it's my own family's heritage. And so what I'm going to read for you tonight to begin with is connected to what we're doing in our workshop this week, which is writing flash memoir. And when I got the list from Beth of the writers, or from Matthias, of the writers who are in that workshop, I quickly did a little research and learned that 7 of the 8 of them are all tenure-line professors in a variety of fields, a really big range, from government to history and so on. Just everyone's doing something really different. And I thought, okay, how can I tailor this reading to be as useful as possible to that particular group of writers? So what I'm going to start with is the personal prefatory note to my most recent book, which just came out last October. And I'm really quite excited about it, but I don't think most of you will be, to be honest, and I'll just share it with you. It's called Tears and Flowers, A Poet of Migration in Old Key West. And Beth tried her very best to get these 2, but if you get super interested, then they're easily available from your local independent bookshop or online. And it's a facing page edition with the Spanish on the left and the new English translation on the right. And this is a book of poems that was initially published in 1918 on the island of Key West in Spanish only, and was nearly lost forever. There's only one extant copy. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. So I thought, maybe using flash memoir as a way into a scholarly project could be useful for some of you who are working on scholarly material or in other fields, right? Because it provides a more personal, warmer, more intimate point of entry and sort of tells the story behind the story. So I'm going to start with this. And it's called On the Origin of the Manuscript. My grandfather, as I knew him, was a silent man. When we visited my grandparents' house on Elizabeth Street in Key West in the 1970s and 80s, he sat in a brown upholstered rocker in the TV room all morning, listening to Spanish language radio and doing Spanish language social words, circling the long diagonal streaks of letters with a pen. At noon, Poppy would clump out to the kitchen where my grandmother had been cooking since 6 a.m. and sit down, surrounded by all the aunts and uncles and grandchildren and whoever was working in the print shop, usually Uncle Mario, I guess. And we would devour the spread of garlic roast pork or ropa vieja or papas rellenas with ground beef or picadillo, always with plenty of hot gold maduros and black beans and rice on the side. Is there anything we can do about that? I have a syllabate S, a slight syllabate S. Is that too annoying? Should I hold this farther away? Is it okay? Is it okay? I can hear it. Okay. We children chattered in English while my father and aunts and grandmother switched back and forth between languages, but even when the conversation slid entirely to Spanish, Papi hardly spoke. After lunch, he'd retired to the TV room to resume his search of words until my grandmother, finished with her housework, was ready to watch Mod Squad, which I watched with her, and American soap operas, which I didn't, at which point he would rise heavily from his rocking chair, sigh, and clump back to his room, a bedroom separate from hers at the very back of the house. I rarely remember seeing him in the evenings when we'd come in still all wild and rambunctious after a hot day swimming at the beach or fishing from the docks. Tired, Papi kept to himself. Already 47 years old when my father was born in 1939, he seemed nothing short of ancient to me. Dignified, remote, and aloof, he was separated from us children by old age and a language barrier he deplored. When it was time for us to leave, to return to Miami or London or West Virginia, wherever we were living at the time, he would gesture me toward him, embrace me awkwardly, and press a folded $1 bill into my hand. "Remember, Papi," he said every time. They were the only words he ever spoke to me. Remember, the only English I ever heard him utter. Every time a tear or two would run down his cheek. I was 14 when he died in 1982. My cousins and I were hushed and respectful at the funeral, and it was sad watching the older people be sad together, but though it sounds cold, not much of a sense of grief seemed to imbue our generation, to be honest. Papi had simply been too much of a stranger to us. A few years later, my father showed me a book of poems Papi had once published. Fragile, soft cover. I was surprised. I was in college then, studying early 20th century British and US literature, high modernism, Dada, free verse, and quietly struggling with the challenges of being a first-generation scholarship girl, a Latina at an almost all-white school before people talked about such things. We were working-class people. No one in my extended family had ever been to college. My university had no courses in Latinx literature, no Latinx professors, and no Latinx students whom I knew. My only Latino friend was a fellow food server at the restaurant where I waited tables. I read Sandra Cisneros, Julia Alvarez, Esmeralda Santiago, and Judith Ortiz Cofer on my own. When I opened my father's copy of Lágrimas y Flores, Tears and Flowers, the regular stanzas of Papi's poems looked old-fashioned to me, like Longfellow or Whittier, poets our professors had taught us to abjure. With my rocky Spanish, I painstakingly translated a few of his sonnets, only to find that their content, too, seemed flowery and old-fashioned. Endless praise of beautiful women with imagery I found entirely over the top. There were poems about Cuba and Spain and politics, too, but I didn't know any of the references. If that stuff were important, wouldn't I have heard of it? I had no context, no frame. Tears and flowers, I thought. Ugh, didn't everyone's grandfather leave behind some sentimental nonsense or another? I dismissed my Galician Cuban-American grandfather's poetic work as U.S. writers and literary critics had been dismissing sentiment since Nathaniel Hawthorne damned his mob of scribbling women in 1855. I finished 3 degrees in literature focusing on Anglophone modernism. I loved its experimentation, political rebellions, and cool rigors. For my dissertation, advised by an all-white graduate committee, I recovered the work of a white U.S. modernist, Marjorie Latimer, a leftist, feminist, anti-racist, who had published alongside Joyce, Faulkner, and Stein, but married Harlem Renaissance writer Jean Toomer, died in childbirth, and subsequently been forgotten. Anglophone modernism was important, the Academy swore, and Latimer had been, I thought, unjustly left out. The irony is painful. In 2002, the year I was going up for tenure at a small college, my father died by suicide. Papi's book was among his things, along with equally fragile copies of Mis Recuerdos, a book I'd never seen before, Juan Perez Rolo's eyewitness account of the 19th and early 20th century insurgent Cuban community in Key West, a rebel base in the anti-colonial fight against Spain. Perez Rolo had been Papi's father-in-law, my father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, who had died 3 decades before my birth. Curious about the period, of which I'd learned nothing in any history course, I kept my ears open over the next few years, but I was busy raising a son, teaching my classes, and writing books, not to mention coping with the grief of losing my father. And Cuban Key West was more of an idle curiosity than a research interest. I had imbibed, along with the cultural value of humility, the message that my father had believed too despairingly and deeply. We were nothing, nobody, irrelevant. In a white supremacist culture, we were simply also Rands, failures at the American dream. Even within Latinx and Cuban American history, the 19th century story of the utopian, anti-racist, pro-labor rebel community of Key West was invisible, pretty much entirely eclipsed by the post-1959 story of well-to-do exiles fleeing communism and the waves who followed them. Initially largely right-wing, pro-capitalist narrative that my older relatives did not embrace. I knew nothing of that previous 19th century Cuban-American history at the time, believing that my ancestors had come to Key West as economic migrants only, not anti-racist political rebels against Spain's imperial domination of Cuba. In 2019, I ran by chance across an announcement for a month-long National Endowment for the Humanities Summer Institute at the University of Tampa. It was called Jose Marti and the Immigrant Communities of Florida and Cuban Independence at the Dawn of the American Century, focusing on the tobacco towns of Tampa and Key West, the nichest niche I could imagine, and exactly what I had been longing for. My breath caught. At last, a chance to learn about the Cuban community in Key West in the 19th century, to put some flesh on the scant bones of the Key West history I knew. Packing for a month in Tampa, I took Papi's book with me in case any scholar there might be able to offer clarity on whether it had historical value or literary merit. My hope was the slenderest of threads. And then I talk about how that unfolded, and I thank a bunch of people for several paragraphs, lists of names and what they did, which are kind of boring to listen to. But I'm incredibly happy to have had a collaborator, and that University Press of Florida did publish this last year. And now I'm quite thrilled to say it is being taught. It's being adopted for courses across the country and taught, I know at least at Emory University and Northeastern, alongside the poetry of Jose Marti, which would, if you know who that is, like this would like have blown my grandfather and my father away. So, and I thank everyone in a very heartfelt way, including the editor at University Press of Florida who acquired it. They don't usually do bilingual books or poetry, so it was a real stretch for her to believe in this project, and I'm pretty thrilled. This book could not exist without her profound commitment to expanding and complicating the canon of Floridian literature. Remember, Papi, my grandfather used to tell me. It has taken me more than 4 decades to realize and remember his legacy, to piece together our families and our people's torn heritage, and to begin to restore their gifts to the world. Better late, he might have said, than not at all. So that's this project, and I'm really delighted to be able to share it with you. One of the reasons that I did both of these Key West projects is to resist cultural erasure and the very human micropolitical impact it can have. When I gave a reading from One Brilliant Flame at the San Antonio Book Fair when it came out, and my brother, who's a mechanic in Austin, Texas, he drove down to San Antonio with his teenage son, and I read that, and he sat in the audience and just cried, that this part of our heritage was going to be available. So I think this kind of work, and so many people have cultural backgrounds, different kinds of communities that have been erased. If your heritage is erased, your community is erased, your commitments are erased, it's much easier to control you, to otherize you, to eliminate you. So I think this kind of project is really important, and I'll read briefly. So this is a flash memoir piece from Island of Bones, which is a collection of personal essays, and it's called "You Can Avoid the Mistakes I Made." There's a way you can tell when people are serious about killing themselves. They look kind of funny around their gills, like they're breathing harder, faster, just to get enough air. Their eyes wander, dull like the eyes of old dogs, gloss lost, brown marbles gone sticky and coated with dust, staring off to a place you can't see. When they laugh, their hands tremble, and they laugh when nothing's funny. A high, cracked sound like the squawk of a grackle spearing the air. In the shower, water puddles around their feet, clinging near them with a new molecular gravity, as if reluctant to let them go. And when they lift their feet, there's a weird sucking sound, a wet dirge as the water rushes into the damp foot-shaped spaces on the tile, obliterates each trace of them. There are these signs, but no one tells you, and the little brochures from Health and Human Services come too late. My father is a dead man now, and the space where he used to be is a corridor of ruined Sundays, a bakery of stale cakes fallen in at their centers. But you have to eat, so you eat, and everything crumbles dry in your mouth, tasteless. Sundays keep coming, and you leave the phone in its electric black cradle where it does not ring, where the sacred numbers will not appear again in the little screen. But kindly people don't ask anymore, and you are assumed to be over it all, and you assume that too, except when the spasms come over you, and you put your hand out to the wall and wait, and then you do resume breathing. And eventually you resign yourself to that as well. And nothing's happening in the plot of After the Suicide. No one's going anywhere or doing anything or having interesting conflicts that might soon be resolved in some unexpected yet believable fashion. There's just an emptiness where a story's supposed to be. And that's how it is. That's how it feels. That's how death leaves you when they kill themselves. I write against that. This is super new. So I just had the really wonderful opportunity to spend a month in Key West, and I recommend it highly to all of you because it was an artist residency at the studios of Key West. Beautiful facilities and artists from all different backgrounds. There was an Emmy-nominated set decorator who had a long career in Hollywood and was moving to textile design. There was a photographer who was doing marine photography of the restoration of coral reefs and mangroves, and there was a sculptor, a jewelry designer, and there was me. And they also do musicians sometimes, filmmakers, etc. So apply, get your month. It's a beautiful opportunity, and the facilities are just phenomenal, really, really phenomenal. And it's a rich, vibrant, artistic community there. It's also a very progressive community. When I was there this last month in June, there were a lot of pride activities going on. Key West has a long LGBTQ history, and we went, 4 artists went to the No Kings protest, so it's a really interesting community. This is also Flash, but it's fiction. And I know some of you are working on dialogue. Maybe you said something about that, and scene. And so this, often I try to lean into the music, but this is actually a lifted conversation. It's like a found object that I then made into fiction. And it's Flash fiction or Flash nonfiction is usually defined as being 1,000 words or fewer. And I really love the form. I love compression, urgency, intensity. How much can you do on a page? Right? And so this one is 260 words, and it's called Beach Chisme. And some of you know that chisme is Spanish and means gossip. So beach gossip. They were rounding up people at Publix last week. I know, a woman's voice. They're hauling off managers from Circle K and everything. Yeah, he said. They even stopped to ship. Checked everyone's papers and took like 200 people. Oh my God, no, she said. What a disaster. Yeah. Excuse me, said Elena, approaching them. Though she eavesdropped often, she ordinarily didn't interrupt strangers, much less reveal that she'd been listening. Did I hear you say that ICE stopped a ship near here? Yeah, a cruise ship. He was a deeply tanned white man with a sun-bleached beard and a taut paunch. Hauled off 200 of their employees. Oh my God. Elena shook her head, her eyes wide. He looked her up and down, slowly. Yeah, he said. It's time. The other woman nodded vigorously. 100%, she said. His volume increased. You don't belong here. It's time to go. Elena backed away, smiling brightly in confusion, realizing her mistake. She returned to her red towel on the sand. She knelt and lay down. With her cheek on her folded arms, she looked out at the ocean, her breath coming fast. She could still hear them. The woman said, like, what a mess. How did they even find more staff on such short notice? With one hand, Elena reached and touched, like a talisman, to comfort herself, her little canvas beach bag with its tube of sunscreen, and her debit card, and flimsy hat, and Minnesota driver's license. How slight they were, the things that might protect her, if it came to that. Thank you.